Aan sy liefde is daar geen einde nie. Loof die Here, want hy is goed. Aan sy liefde is daar geen einde nie. Loof die oppermagtige God. Aan sy liefde is daar geen einde nie. Loof die magtigste van al die maghebbers. Aan sy liefde is daar geen einde nie. Hy hou ons in die holte van sy hand. Hy dra ons vandag en elke dag. Aan sy liefde is daar geen einde nie. Amen. Gemeente, barmhartigheid en genade van ons Here Jesus Christus bly by u nou en vir altyd. Amen.
Die wilde van die Heer, gekleed in majesteit, die hele aarde juig, die hele aarde juig. Hy kleed homself met lig, en duisternis moet vlug. Begin en die einde, begin en die einde. Hoe groot is ons God, ons sing hoe groot is ons God. Almal sal sien, hoe groot is ons God.
Good morning, everyone. Our reading comes from Hosea 6, verse 1 to 3. Come, let us return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces, but He will heal us. He has injured us, but He will bind up our wounds. After 2 days, He will revive us. On the third, He will restore us, that we may live in His presence. Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to acknowledge Him. As surely as the sun rises, He will appear. He will come to us like the winter rains, like the spring rains that water the earth. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a blessed day.
Vandag, Vader God, is ons weer dankbaar vir die feit dat ons hier kan wees, Vader God. Vir die feit dat ons nog gesond kan wees, Vader God. Vir die feit dat U vir ons in die kos en dierbare bloed gehou het, Vader God. Vader God, alle lof, prys en eer aan U, Vader God. Vader, dankie vir die genade en die hand van bewaring oor ons, Vader God. Vader God, ek kom selfs vandag, Vader God, en vra vir U, Vader God, vir leiding en wysheid, Vader God. Vader God, ek vra vir U, Vader God, om saam met ons te wees, Vader, terwyl ons die verskillende challenges wat daar buite kan is, Vader God. Vader God, U weet, hierdie week, wat ons sien op die nuus is net gender-based violence, en die jong mense, jong vroumense, hulle lewe verloor het, Vader God, as gevolg van gender-based violence, Vader God. Vader, ek vra vir U, wees saam met die families, wees saam met die vroumense daar buite kan wat daardeur moet gaan, Vader God. Vader God, ek vra vir U vir leiding, ek vra vir U vir wysheid vir ons mansmense, sodat ons moet weet, dit is nie van U af nie, Vader God. Ek vra vir U, wees vir ons ook genadig, Vader God, in terme van, laat ons moet beginne, ook meer moet in U vashou, Vader God. Vader God, ek vra vir U, wees aan almal aan buitekant, Vader God, U weet hoe die wêreld staan, Vader God, hoe mense meer en meer begin honger wees, Vader God. Ek vra vir U om te wees aan diegene wat selfs hulle werk verloor het, wat die kos op die tafel het vandag nie. Ek vra vir U om die hand van bewaring oor hulle te sit, Vader God. Vader God, ek selfs vra ek vir U, Vader God, U weet, soms kyk ons en ons praat oor drankmisbruik, maar U weet selfs watter ongelukke wat hierdie week selfs gebeur het, as gevolg van drankmisbruik, Vader God, ek self die groot rol wat dit speel, ook in gender-based violence, Vader God. Ek vra vir U net vir U leiding, Vader God. Vader, ek vra vir U wysheid, Vader God. Niks anders nie, Vader God. Ek vra vir U vir genade, Vader God. Maar ook, Vader God, kan ek in dieselfde tyd vir U dank en vir U prys, Vader God, vir hoe U vir ons altyd alle antwoorde kan gee, Vader God. Dankie vir alles, Vader God. Dankie vir genade, Vader God. Vergeef ook wel vir ons, Vader, in tye wat ons sondig, Vader God. Vader, dankie, Vader God, vir die feit dat ons nog kan diens hou, Vader God. Die feit dat ons nog noem net wat vir ons kan preek, Vader God. Die feit dat ons nog na die U boodskap kan luister, Vader God. Spreek self net van genade, Vader God. Dankie vir alles, Vader God. En wees aan ons verder, Vader God, in U wonderlike naam. Amen.
This morning, I want to start a sermon series on the attributes of God. We easily speak of these attributes like all-knowing, all-powerful, everlasting, almighty. We accredit all these characteristics and attributes to God. But rarely do we discuss these attributes in relation to the existential question of being human. Our reading this morning is Hosea 6 verse 3. Come, let us know. Let us press on to know the Lord. The translated Hebrew word for know is yada. This is a critical word for us to understand. When we see the word know, we think of our minds. what's going on in our brain, our cognitive association. We think about the facts and the figures and the mental acumen of things. But in Hebrew, they think more when they hear the word know. For them, it is much more than just our cognitive association. For them, to know in my mind is also what I experience in my heart. There's a huge difference for a Hebrew interpreter of the word know. To know God with my mind is to miss everything. You need to combine my knowledge of God, my heart, my emotions, my receptivity, my experience, my mind. That is all part of knowing. That's the biblical understanding of the word know. Know with my head, my mental abilities, and with my feelings. This is what Hosea is telling us, to press on to know the Lord. Theologian Reed Lessing speaks of two types of people who knows the Lord. He speaks of balcony people and of people driving, walking, and biking. And then he goes on in saying that balcony people is those who want to know God, but only in their head. They look down on other people. They are very philosophical and theological. They can tell others exactly how to drive, how to walk, and how to bike without doing it themselves. They are onlookers. They are disconnected from engaging with others. They want to know God with the head, not their feelings, neither with their emotional capacity. Balcony people are all about the head and nothing about the heart. Lessing continues in arguing that people who are driving, walking, and biking people are also people that want to know God, but not only in the abstract and in a philosophical or a theological way. No, he states that drivers and bikers and walkers, they on the streets. They are involved. They want to know God, not just from a mental capacity, but in their hearts, not just cognitively, but with their feelings. Yes, my sister and brother, we must decide what type of Christian are we. Hosea 6 is a clarion call to God, to know God, to yada God, to press on and to know, to yada God in all his glory. For God is the all-knowing God. So we read in Hebrews chapter 4 verse 12. No creature is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and exposed to the eyes of him whom we must give an account. The word we use for what the Hebrew author writes is omniscient. God knows everything. We see God knows everything about the whole of creation. And so when we read what the Hebrew author is saying, we know that God He knows everything about creation. God knows all about creation. I know all the birds. So we read in Psalm 50 verse 11. There is 3 billion species of birds. And now the psalmist is telling us that this great and awesome God, He knows them all, for He is the creator that is familiar with all that He created. Psalm 147 verse 4 tells us God determines the numbers of stars and call them by name. This shows how great and how awesome God is, that God numbers and He names all the stars that has ever existed. Throughout the many billions of galaxies, God has created all the stars. So God knows all about creation. But dear brothers and sisters, God knows all about history as well. Isaiah 46 verse 10 declares, I declare the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done. God knows the beginning, the middle, and the end. He knows our tomorrow today. And He knows what was, what is, and what is to come. So we can say God knows all about creation. And God knows all about history. Which implies that God knows all about you. And God knows all about me. What does He know about me? God knows all about my failures. Psalm 69 verse 5 tells us, God, you know my folly, the wrongs I have done. All that I have done are not hidden from you. Sometimes we think no one knows about all our failures. But friend, this morning I want to tell you that God knows. David is telling us that God knows about all my folly, all the stupid and idiotic stuff I have said, I have done, I have thought. He knows it all. The wrongs I have done. It's not hidden from God because God, He knows all of it. We do not have to live like Adam did in Genesis chapter 3 when he was guilty of sinning and he tried to hide from God, realizing that it is impossible to hide from the Almighty God. In our daily lives, we cannot come to a point and speak of ways in which we refer to as things off the record. There's no such thing because God knows everything, even those things and those conversations that we might think nobody hears, but God knows, and we cannot hide that from Him. God knows our failures, but God knows all about our frustrations. So we read in Psalm 31 verse 7, you have seen my affliction. You have known the distress of my soul. God knows that life can be frustrating. We say, God, you don't know sometimes when we go through difficulty. But Psalm 31 tells us that God, Yada, know all about my frustration and distress. He knows with his own heart, with his own emotion, and with his own experience. He experiences my pain and my distress and frustration. He is moved by my situation. So God, He knows all about my failure. And God knows all about my frustration. But God also knows all about my future. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that you formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. So we read in Psalm 139 verse 6. God has formed us. God knows our future. He knows every step that we will make in life. For He is this all-knowing God that will be with us. This God that knows our future. It doesn't matter that sometimes we feel we don't have a future. But in God, Psalm 139 tells us that in Him we have a great future. So if God knows all about our failures and He knows all about our frustrations, and we have a future that God knows, and we can also tell you this morning that God knows all about your fears. So we read in Matthew chapter 6 verse 8, your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Fear can be crippling. We all live with fear. Some of us right now in this situation of isolation and of physical distancing, we are filled with fear for our children, for our grandchildren. We fear for our financial situation. But this morning, God knows. He knows all about your fears. And He is the one that before we can ask Him, He's already familiar with all that we are afraid of. So when we say that God knows all about our failures, that God knows all about our frustrations, that God knows all about our future, and that God knows all about our fears, we can also say to you this morning that God knows all about my faithfulness. You see, dear brothers and sisters, so we read in Matthew 6 that when you give to the needy. Now, who is the needy? The needy is anybody and everybody. For we all at one stage are in need. And sometimes when somebody shows kindness and shows compassion and shows love, expressions of love by giving to others, God, He knows about that faithfulness, and He will bless you in secret for that faithfulness that you reveal. And so that is why when you call yourself, like Reed Lessing say, a involved Christian, a Christian that wants to know God, will be a Christian that will remain faithful even in difficult times like this. You will give and know that God, He will bless your faithfulness. Brothers and sisters, this morning, as we are gathered and as we are seated here as we are gathered here, we know that we need God to move in us and through us. And we know that we serve this omniscient God who made the promise that He will never leave us nor forsake us. So come this morning and show that you are a true follower of God, the all-knowing God. May God work through you in this week. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Here, vergewe ons, wanneer ons vergeet dat U die God is, wat met alles bekend is. Vergewe ons, Here, wanneer ons nie lewe volgens U wil nie. Ons kom vanmôre, ons dra, Here, ons familie, ons kinders, ons jong mense, ons gemeente op. En besonder, Here, wil ons U die lof toeswaai vir Suster Lynn Katzen, wat vanmôre die skriflesing kon behartig. En tog, Here, is sy al in die 2de week van haar isolasie, omdat sy positief vir COVID-19 getoets was. Ons wil U loof, want U het deur haar lewe gewys, dat U haar vrese ken, dat U haar situasie ken, en vanmôre kan sy op Sionsmure staan, en sê, die Here is my oorwinnaar. Ons kom, Here, in die getuienis van haar lewe vanmôre. Kom ons, en ons kom getuig van ons afhanklikheid aan U. Liewe Heer, hoor ons smeking, hoor ons hulpgeroep, hoor ons uitroep, wanneer ons sê, wees U naby ons, elke dag van ons lewens. Kom, Here, en lei ons verder. Ons is hierdie week onbekend mee, maar ons weet U is die alomwetende, die een wat weet, die een wat gister, vandag en ook môre in die hande hou. Daarom kan ons onsself aan U toevertrou, want slegs U kan dit vir ons doen. Kom, Here, en wees nou saam met ons. Ons bid dit in die naam van Jesus, wie ons bron van lewe is, nou en vir altyd. Amen. Gemeente van die Here, ontvang die seën van die Here. Die genade van ons Here Jesus Christus, die liefde van God ons Vader, en die troostvolle gemeenskap van Gods Heilige Gees, sy en bly met ons elkeen, van nou af tot in ewigheid. Amen.